Hello, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. I have got two cards for you today in the obstacles, the dangerous obstacles. We got the Eight of Pentacles and the opportunity. Got the Five of Wands. So some broad strokes here. First of all, it's kind of interesting. I quite like this card, and I know the guy depicted in this card. Not literally, but I know a couple people that really strike me as this kind of individual. This is a good looking card. Sometimes it's a little difficult to come up with foreboding obstacle like interpretations of cards as nice as this, but nonetheless, I will do it. And then the five. So one thing about the eight, this is it's a receptive card. I think this is, even though it depicts someone in action doing something, I think this is much more a card of a period of stillness, as I think the Marseille card demonstrates with its obvious symbolism. No, just kidding. Um, yeah, uniformity. It's one of the things that nice even numbers often bring. I guess this might be uh, more easily understandable with something like a 10 or 100. But these nice round numbers, they're perfect in a sense. The eight here in the tarot and in numerology, eight symbolize perfection in a lot of ways. Um, but yeah, these nice round numbers, they're perfect, and that perfection also often inspires us to not touch them. They're they're not very active numbers, whereas the five, this is an active card, as we can see in the Waite in the Waite deck on the right. There's certainly some activity going on there, uh, chaotic activity almost. But yeah, let's start with the obstacle. So, looking at the Waite card, the simplest symbolic interpretation of this as something to watch out for, maybe as a negative, is is spending too much time in a prototyping or apprenticing position, or preoccupying yourself with practicing for too long. Sooner or later, you got to get out there. You got to actually start doing the job. A lot of people are can often be not paralyzed exactly, because they are doing work, but they're just getting ready. They're just getting their ducks in order. They're just getting all the tools they need before they could start. I think that's one of the negative symbolic meanings of this card, is this kind of, it's like those people who are, there are people, I know a couple of people like this. They just they haven't stopped going to school since they started university or college, and they're in their 40s now. They just love the school environment, the learning environment so much that they just want to keep learning. And every time, they convince themselves, you know what, I really want to study electronics, then I would love to do electronics work, is so exciting. And they kind of keep deceiving themselves a little bit every time. Every time they finish, they get their degree or whatever. Now all of a sudden they're interested in something else. They've redefined the parameters of what they're seeking out. So I think the warning here could be that um, you might be overstaying your welcome in that preparatory practice, getting ready stage. Just, it might be time to dive in. Miyamoto Musashi, the famous, well, I guess to some people, the famous samurai, said that there is no practice, that you should eliminate the concept of practice from your mind. He, when teaching sword fighting, suggested that students don't practice with wooden swords, with safe swords. He said you got to practice with a real sword. Sure, it's really fucking dangerous, people are going to get hurt, but you're even more likely to get hurt if you get comfortable practicing with a wooden sword that can't really hurt you, then you get into a real duel with someone with real swords, and that's really your first fight. All that practice was for nothing because the only thing you got good at was fighting with wooden swords, and it's a completely different thing. I remember also in in high school, I believe, convincing my bandmates that we need to stop practicing because we just kept practicing our band. We just kept rehearsing in the garage, and people kept offering, there's a battle of the bands, there's a show coming up, and my other bandmates were like, no, we got to keep practicing, we got to keep practicing. And I remember convincing them that, like, I agree, we got to keep practicing, but we should start practicing on stage in front of real audiences. That, like, we're never going to get so much practice in the garage that when we play our first live show in front of an audience, that will just be perfect. It'll always be a new thing. So this card might symbolize working under that illusion, getting out there. As far as the Marseille card, does it go this way or does it go this way? We don't know. This one doesn't even have numbers. Unlike, these ones, which, okay, so you got the Roman numeral 5 there on the side. But anyway, this card, I think this reminds me of an interesting economics idea about equality. Here we see all of these pentacles, the deniers, the coins. They're all equally divided. They're very balanced, symmetrical. That's the word I'm looking for. And they're very divided in their symmetry. These flower growths these petals and flowers are separating them into their own little compartments. And I think that this might symbolize how it's inequality that contributes to the creation of any sort of market forces, because dealing with pentacles, coins here, largely this is symbolic of resources, of money, food, clothes, medicine, housing, things like that. But that when things are distributed perfectly evenly, there's this isolation that happens. If everyone had a perfectly equal amount of everything, then we can imagine, I mean, it's a hypothetical situation, but if everyone had the exact same amount of everything, we could imagine that there would be no more trade. There would be no more business because no one would have anything that anyone else doesn't have. Like everyone has the same amount of dollars, everyone has the same house, and it's the differences between what each individual possesses, not just in terms of resources, but also in terms of their intelligence, their knowledge, which is an interesting component to equity politics that so far isn't being discussed. I hope it starts popping up in the sort of conversations that people are having about it. But nonetheless, so I think again this kind of represents. This is where I get my sort of classical root symbolic meanings from the tarot. From the Marseille deck here. And so this one, I think what this symbolizes to me very well is the constricting, freezing nature of attaining some sort of perfection, particularly like a perfectly well distributed, a perfectly evenly distributed wealth, is that it's all very symmetrical and pretty conceptually. It's very attractive. It's an attractive idea to strive for. But once you get there, it just freezes everything in place. And how that could be, a thing to watch out for. And then, boom, we got the Five of Wands, and this card, in contrast to this receptive still card, this is an active transformative card. There's certainly a lot of action, a lot of stuff going on in the series. it's the card that precedes the first card of the wands that represents actions as they start being experienced or expressed on a more cerebral or spiritual on a higher sort of on a higher level, more to do with the conceptualization of actions and their deeper meanings as opposed to just the raw actual physical actions. The earlier cards I think are more about like the physical, whether it's physical activity, violence, sexuality, things like that. And yeah, and I think this card represents kind of like the chaos, the chaos that precedes the first ideas for order, for organizing action, for organizing physical activity, for standardizing it, and maybe for putting someone in charge. The five and the six here, I think they're visually they seem to symbolize to me opposites, you know, and this is chaos. We can't tell who's in charge. We can't really tell who's got the upper hand. We can't tell who's winning or who's losing. Everyone seems to be on pretty even ground. Now, I think that the the good thing about the good thing about this card is I think this is a great environment to lead to something like the six. And I think the six potentially, you know, has its own problems. Politics gone awry is certainly a dangerous, no fun time. But I think that in the way that this Eight of Pentacles might be warning us that, you know, staying safe and isolated, practicing your own thing, particularly if it's something that is generally performed or done publicly, that doing it alone, practicing, you know, it might be an idea. It might be a good idea to sort of come out of that bubble, come out of that shell, and get into the world. I think this is the world that it might be talking about. And while it seems chaotic and potentially painful and violent, that there's that the that there's an opportunity here to pursue, and that is that it's from this kind of chaos that you figure out what really matters. Like plunging yourself into this to this chaotic, active, transforming. You know, like this is almost like the market. You know, you think you have an idea for what your business is going to be. You've been planning, you've been preparing. I think people will really love product X. You know, you've been working on it, but then sooner or later you got to get into the market, and then this is like the marketplace, and it's just so many things are going to be coming at you that you never thought of that you were prepared for. But that's good. This is the kind of chaos that helps you grow, and it helps you figure out what the priorities are. Maybe you can't do all the things you wanted to do because it's just too crazy in this sort of realm. But the opportunity here is that it's like this is the crucible. You know, you're gonna burn away all the impurities, and only the thing that is of essential necessity is what will remain. Um, yeah, yeah. Here also the card following the eight, the Knight of Pentacles. The knights are really like the. Sometimes I think of the knights as the kings after they leave their throne. They get all suited up, and this is their journey out into the world. The kings, I don't have any here to demonstrate. The kings are sort of like looking outside of their kingdom, like they're starting to think about it, they're considering stuff. But the knights are the guys who actually get out into that new field, start exploring. So this card, this five, this might be one of those things that this Knight of Pentacles might encounter on his journey, even though it'll be in relative to this card, it'll be more along the resource money career sort of path, as opposed to this being action, the pecking order. Um, maybe you know, this five could represent getting back into the dating world. You know, wands, fire, redness, action, sexuality. This could be like competition amongst people in your peer group for who the alpha is, like that kind of stuff. It could be um, going to some sort of public public gathering, public event, and engaging in lively sparring, whether it's conversational or physical on some acceptable level, to establish, to figure out who like the best man is or the best woman is. To yeah, that kind of energetic sparring, potentially inspired by um, the prospect of hooking up with someone, or yeah, something along those lines. Uh, that's it for today. Hope you got something interesting to think about. Drop me a like if you liked it. Thanks. Take care. Talk to you tomorrow.